Hello, everyone. I have a very special guest, Al Filreis, who's the faculty director of the Kelly Writers House, English professor and a writer. So welcome, Al.
Thank you, Jerry. Good to see you.
Good to see you, man. After all these years, you have not changed. Like,
Hey,
this
how
is
long
awesome.
has it been?
It's been probably more than 10 years.
Really?
Yeah. Time goes by fast.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. So let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about what you wanted to do. Let's say when you were in high school, when you were in college, did you always wanted to be a writer? Always wanted to do what you currently do?
Oh, no, no, no. Well, look, I went to let's just say mediocre public high school in suburban New Jersey. Did not prepare me for college very well, although there were some good teachers there. And then I went to college, a small college in upstate New York, Colgate University. It was a small place. And frankly, Colgate is a very good university now, but at the time it was mixed. And some people were, really serious about reading and learning and talking, and other people weren't. And I felt a little alienated by the latter group.
Mhm.
I got a good education, but at this point I was still a babe in the woods in terms of how you lead an intellectual life. Everybody around me thought, oh, he's smart, he should be a lawyer. I guess it's what my family thought in any case. And I was encouraged by my faculty mentors there, went to graduate school. But even then, at the University of Virginia, I had no idea what academia was about. So really, it was a long time before I developed a sense of what I wanted to do as a professor, and came out with my PhD at the right moment, Jerry, when the job market for academics was thawing a little bit. It was the mid 80s, and lucky enough to get some offers. I had expected I would end up in a small college somewhere. I wound up at a big university, and this is my 40th year at Penn.
Wow.
So that didn't really answer your question. No, I didn't. I was a reader, but not a reader of well-selected books. I just read what my suburban environment delivered to me. The Count of Monte Cristo, a couple of political thrillers that got me. I remember the book that turned me on as a narrative page turner was a book called 7 Days in May. It's just a novel that became a film, a novel about a coup d'etat in the United States, some military people, and not great literature, but I realized, oh my God, this is interesting. So I came to caring about ideas fairly late. None of that in my family, particularly. My dad was self-taught mostly. And he came out of a very poor family of immigrants. So, I don't know. Sometimes academics turn out to be, I don't know if self-made is the right word, but, self-creating.
Mm-hmm. And did they have AP Lit and AP Lit back in the day when you went to high school?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Interesting. There's a reason I asked this question. I got to give Anthony, who's a current high school student at the high school I went to, props for asking this question. I took AP Lang. A lot of us who went to college, probably post 2000s, took AP Lang, took AP Lit. But Penn made us retake a writing class, which was one of the best classes. I learned how to write way better. And I realized that, wow, AP Lang, AP Lit didn't really prepare me at all to learn how to write.
Well, AP English is a literature course, and the writing course that you were required to take is not a literature course. So there was not a good match there. But you're somewhat misremembering, but it's probably the case that the writing seminar, such as it was when you were there, was a requirement that you couldn't get out of because it was important to the university that everybody take a writing course.
Yeah. Either way, the writing course taught a lot. And then I have to give a lot of credit. My senior year, I took a class that was taught in the Kelly Writers House. And that class drastically improved my writing. So all props to the Kelly Writers House. I wish I was more involved before my senior year. It's just one of those things. Penn's so big. and there's so many forces trying to shape you in different directions. And I was like, well, I wish, but still, I had a lot of good experiences senior year and post. So you guys are doing an amazing job. And let's just segue into the Kelly's Writer House. How was the foundation? What was the impetus to found it?
Well, it happened in October of 1995. We had a new president of the university, Judith Roden, and a new provost, Stanley Chodorow, and they felt, rightly or wrongly, I would say rightly, they felt that the schools, every major university is divided into schools, small colleges aren't, that the schools, 12 schools, let's pause for a second, Jerry. Can you name 5 of the 12 schools at Penn? Can you name them? This is a quiz.
I know Annenberg of
That's
communications is one.
Graduate school, yep.
Probably Wharton.
Yeah, that's another. The business school, yep.
And then engineering.
That's 3.
And then nursing, and then the college.
4, and the college is 5.
Yeah.
Actually 7 more.
I didn't know.
Yeah, so there are 12 schools, and when Judy Roden came to be president of the University of Pennsylvania, she noticed that the deans of the schools were in charge of everything. That means that there is an automatic natural decentralization of not only authority, but intellectuality, right? So, and you probably remember even then when after Judy's time, but certainly people who go back before the mid-90s, it felt like, okay, you went to Penn, you were an engineer, that's what you did, that's who you were, those were your friends, etc. There was very little mixing other than social mixing, and the social mixing took place on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights in West Philly at various dives.
Yeah.
That was the extent of the mixing of people. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not a lot. Excuse me. And the problem was that Judy wanted to preside over the entire university. But it wasn't possible because she had no authority or control over the curriculum of the 12 schools. So her idea was to create these spaces, hubs, she called them, across campus. And that these would be open to everyone and they would be perceived as available in what we call the center of the university. So the center is everything except for the 12 schools. So that would be the air you breathe, the garbage pickup, the computer system, various buildings, the library, various resource centers, etc., centers, institutes. And her thought was, why don't we create a few little spaces, physical spaces, where people who had things in common would be able to physically gather together regardless of their identity within the different schools. There was a house on Locust Walk, right on Locust Walk, that had been resided in by the chaplain, Stanley Johnson, for several decades. But Stanley was retiring and the house was going to become available. So Judy grabbed it for the center, even though the schools all grabbed it for themselves. They wanted to grab it. Wharton was there with cash. They were there saying, we'll buy that house. And that would have been very tempting to many presidents. Get this house off the books. It's going to cost us money to heat it and to keep it lit and to maintain it. Let's let one of the schools take it. But she said, no, I think this would be one of our hubs. In fact, it was the first hub. So make a long story a little shorter. It got to me within a couple of weeks of the house being available for some experiment. And people said to me, what would you do with it? And I said, well, I'd make it a house for writers. And we did. On October 15th, we gathered together in the house, spent the whole day there, students, faculty, staff, alumni, one board member, some West Philly writers, and me. And we sat all day and we designed what every room would be for and how the door would be open. And that was the birth of the Writer's House. And I will say the metaphor of the open door is really important. But Jerry, literally, the house hadn't been maintained. The front door would not close. It was an open door. We never had a card swipe. Still to this day, we don't have a card swipe. You can come, doesn't matter who you are, you can come and walk in. And during the day, we don't lock the door, so everyone can come. The open door becomes a presiding metaphor for this community of writers. And we believe that if you are a duly constituted sophomore in the College of Arts and Sciences with an interest in writing, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But it's the obligation of the university as a big cultural thing to not keep you from all the other people, staff members, former students, nursing students, landscape architects, Philadelphia poets who've never set foot on the university campus, that it's our obligation to put you in conversation with all those people who are not specialized the way you are. And so the writer's house that you walked into was what might be called ecumenical or latitudinarian, open to anyone, and believing that if you open the door to everyone and people walk in, they're going to be ipso facto interesting if you put them in conversation with each other. So the last step of this was to imagine inviting writers, famous ones and not famous ones, novelists, poets, screenwriters, what have you, and bring them to the writer's house and drop them into this mixed society of people willing to talk. So you put a famous or a not famous writer in the middle of the dining room table, and you put people around that person, and the next thing you know, you've got what resembles a seminar, even though it's not for credit and it's free. So that's the presiding idea, and 30 years later, we're celebrating our 30th year, it still happens that way.
Yeah. And so it sounded like you were involved from day one. That was one of your things.
That's what I did. That's right.
Mhm.
I'm the founder of the Writers House, along with a group of people who decided they wanted to be part of it. And we're having in May of 2026, we are having a 30th year celebration. And some of the people coming back were there sitting in that room on October 15th, 1995.
That's amazing. What courses have you taught at Penn, whether through the Kelly Writers House or just as a faculty? How has that evolved?
Since about 1999, I have taught all my courses inside the Writers House.
Mhm.
Sometimes the courses are not, completely closely connected by their ideas to the Writers House, but often they are. So I taught many courses over the years, but the 3 courses that I currently teach are, number 1, Modpo, English 88, or what used to be called English 88, which is a course on modern and contemporary U.S. poetry, which is really not so much a course about poetry, but about how to convene collaboratively around a text that's hard, that's difficult. That's what it is. How to learning how to converse with other people and doing collaborative interpretation. Collective intelligence, that's what that course is about. The second course I teach is a course that I've taught since 1985. It used to be called the Literature of the Holocaust. Now it's just called Representations of the Holocaust. And that's a course I've taught, again, for 40 years and teach it every other fall at this point. And the third course that I teach, I have taught since the year 2000. So I'm in the 26th or 27th year of that, is the Kelly Writers House Fellows Seminar, which was created by me and Paul Kelly, the guy whose gift made it possible, the alum whose gift, the late Paul Kelly, whose gift made it possible to renovate the house, and after whom the house is named. And he came to me once in 1998. He said to me, the Writers House looks great, but the writers you bring are not very famous, and I'm not a literary guy, and I haven't heard of them. I'd like for the Writers House to host some people whose names I've heard of. And I said, well, that's not really our vibe. I mean, with all due respect to this guy who was a friend and a donor and a tremendous supporter. But I took it back to my team and I said, well, what if Paul was willing to fund bringing a major writer, would that go against our vibe? And the answer is, yeah, sort of, but let's see it. Let's try it. So what we did is we developed a program whereby each winter, spring, one in February, one in March, one in April, a famous writer, an eminent writer, sometimes a super famous writer, comes to the Writers' House, spends a couple days with us. And there's a seminar that goes along with that, an actual 4-credit seminar that I teach, in which the students and I spend a month reading everything we can of that writer. Then at the end of that month, that writer comes, and the first thing that writer does is spend 3 hours with the students alone, just them, in the Arts Cafe, front parlor of the Writers' House. Then they do a public program and so forth. So this is a double whammy. We get famous writer comes to the Writers' House for public audience, a free program, but also students get to study and then actually talk with for 3 hours, interact with that writer, thus making a distinction that the Writers' House is all about, which is we're not interested in studying literature as such. We're interested in studying writers, who are people who write books and who have ideas and who have personalities and who can tell us what the life of the writer is like, which you can't do if you're studying Charles Dickens, who's, alas, long dead. And, many people would argue it doesn't matter what kind of personal life Charles Dickens had. What's important is the novels. And the Writers' House begs to differ, which is to say, Joan Didion, just about as the late Joan Didion, just about as famous a nonfiction writer and a fiction writer as you can get, comes to the teeny weeny Writers' House, super famous person, and is willing to come and spends 3 hours, Joan Didion and a bunch of undergraduates for 3 hours. That is the revolution that is Kelly Writers' House Fellows, which is a program that continues on. So those are my courses.
I have to really highlight the modern poetry, the Modpo, because you also have a course on Coursera that's free for people, and you have the videos on YouTube. So you're using the digital age, you're using the new media to help people. And I'm very impressed in that because I built a career in new media, so to speak. So it's like, I remember even when I was at Penn, I was like, Al is one of those, he sees where everything's going, sees where communications go. You were always trying to get on it. So give you all the credit, man.
Oh, that's very sweet of you to say. Yeah, well, the Modpo, the online version of Modpo. So a minute ago, you asked me about my courses at Penn, and Modpo is one of them, but that's 20 students sitting around in a circle in person.
Mm-hmm.
But Modpo, the open online course, massive open online course, otherwise known as a MOOC, Modpo has a current enrollment of almost 98,000 people.
Wow.
98,000. I just sent them all a note this morning.
Mm-hmm.
They're all over the world, 179 countries. They skew mostly older, though there's some young people in there. And of course, I don't know who most of them are. But yeah, it's an open course, and it is, people can find it at modpo.org, and it's free, utterly, absolutely, no holds barred, free. There is not a hidden charge. There's not an explicit charge. It's free. Everything is free, free, free.
Yeah. This is kind of a very thought-provoking question. And again, I'm going to give Anthony, who goes to WJ right now, credit for this question, but it's worth discussing with you. So if you learn math from a first principles perspective, right? Okay, learn your arithmetic, then learn your algebra, then learn your geometry, and then then you build on it and eventually get to calculus, etc. So there's a method to kind of getting good at math. What is, if there is, a method to, let's say, getting good at writing or getting good at English? Is that, like, it's such a deep question he asked me yesterday. I was like, let me ask Al if he has any insights into this.
Why do you think Anthony asked the question?
I think Anthony currently really enjoys the math and the sciences more, but I see a budding interest in English. He asked me a lot of English questions. That's why I was like, so I think he's trying to apply a paradigm to something a world that he's not as familiar with. So I think that's why he's asking that question.
All right. Well, shout out to Anthony. It's a good question. It's a question I get a lot. The first answer I want to say is no. No, Anthony. It's not a parallel. But then I'll say more like yes. But we'll start with no and get to yes. So no. If I give you, and if we had all the time in the world, which we don't, we would pull out a poem right now. We'd pull out a poem by Emily Dickinson, you and I. and we would read it together. I would read it aloud, you would read it, and we would then spend, probably takes about 20 minutes. We're not going to do it because we don't have time, but it take 20 minutes, 25 minutes, but it could also be 3 hours if we have that leisure, talking about what the poem does, how it makes its meaning, and what it means. No prerequisites. All you need to do is, well, in this case, of course, read English, because Dickinson is in English, but you don't actually need to do that. We can translate it into any language. So you don't have any prerequisites. All you need is a way of either being virtually or in person somewhere with the people that you're talking with about the poem. That's what Modpo is.
Yeah.
We call it Collective Collaborative Close Readings, CCCR. Collective Collaborative Close Readings. So let's go to close readings. So if I take the problem, we'll use Anthony's mathy language. They talk about problems, right? If I present the problem of an Emily Dickinson poem to Anthony, he's going to say, bringing the assumptions he made when he asked that question, he's going to say, okay, if it were a math problem, I'd need to know A, B, and C already, because I took some earlier courses. Prerequisites, they call it. Prerequisites. Are we allowed to curse on the...
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I say fuck prerequisites. The very notion of prerequisite irks me. I suppose there's some prerequisites when you read a poem by Emily Dickinson. One is you probably need to be human, although there are some non-human ways of reading Dickinson. But let's assume you're human. You have to be open-minded enough to want to make a mistake or to think you're making a mistake when you interpret the poem. And you need ears. You need to listen. And if your hearing is impaired, you don't even need to listen in a literal way. You can read what people say. That's all you need. You have those things, you can do it. Now, the thing that Anthony is looking for, I have a feeling, being a STEMmy guy, is that there will be some kind of answer that he can walk away from and say, oh, I got it. Now I've got the prerequisite to go on to Emily Dickinson 102. Then it'll be Emily Dickinson 202 and 205, section 207. Because you're never going to get anywhere with Emily Dickinson. We have no idea what she meant. She didn't. We do have some idea, but I have taught Emily Dickinson, a few of Emily Dickinson's poems for 43 years. And I still find that when I put people together who are earnestly willing to speak openly about what a poem means, I'm waiting for someone to figure it all out. It doesn't happen. That's because there's a certain infinity of ways of reading. That's because if Jerry and Al and Emily, the three of us, triangulate around one of Emily's poems, Jerry has a subjectivity. I have a subjectivity. And Emily, though she's gone and can't speak to us, has a subjectivity which she presented in the poem. You got three subjectivities and an infinite combination and permutation of possibilities of what anything means. So prerequisites are a joke. What they do is they make a hierarchy of learning. And, I guess I have the luxury, being a poetry person, to live in a world where the hierarchy doesn't matter. In fact, it usually gets in the way.
Wow, that is a beautiful answer. And it highlights why, even though I've been building my STEM more all these years, I'm still a humanities person, because there's the beauty in that subjectivity. There's the beauty in that even if you threw out all the prerequisites, you could still lead to something amazing, right? That's why humanities is so beautiful, if you can embrace that.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we use the word elegant in math. There are elegant proofs and elegant solutions to problems. And that elegance implies aesthetics. It implies beauty. I'm not saying there isn't such a thing. But if somebody says, oh my, that is an elegant solution to a math problem, or, oh, I don't know, when, you know, the NASA guys in the 60s and 70s had a problem. I say guys, they were mostly guys. When the NASA guys had a problem they wanted to solve, and they came up with a solution, which actually might save the lives of astronauts or whatever, and you called it an elegant solution, that elegance created a certain humane, warm feel, a good feel, celebratory. You know, Apollo 13, crack open the champagne bottles, right? So it's possible to think about a STEM problem being addressed as beautiful. So there's no reason to exclude the possibility that a STEM way of mind can bring beauty along with it. What I would like to say is that rather than bring Anthony's assumptions, or the assumptions that he was representing there, over from a STEM building to a humanities and arts building, rather than do that, leave them alone. Leave one place and go to another. Then go back to your STEM world with what I would consider to be an openness to the beauty of solutions that are not solutions, which requires tolerance, the tolerance of imprecision, and the acceptance of not knowing. I teach at the University of Pennsylvania, where, as you know, everybody comes there and thinking what I need to do is learn how to solve all the problems that are presented to me as aggressively as possible. And as in certain martial arts or just athletics generally, if someone comes at it with aggression, you can usually take advantage of it and turn it into a weakness. And so that's my underlying, what's the word, scheme or game. When I see a student come in and say, I want to know this, by the end of the semester, I want to achieve this particular thing, I usually take that aggression and make it fail for them. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, they say, oh, I remember this feeling of accepting that the world is complicated and I'm not going to come up with an answer. And this goes for opinions too, in the free speech sense, right? The other day, I was listening to somebody, an expert on free speech, talk in a podcast. And she was pretty strident in her views, but she was so personally warm and funny, you know? And the host says, can you define hate speech? Very controversial thing to try to do, define hate speech. You can't do it. But she was so open-minded in her definition that I thought, oh, I disagree with her, but you know what? This is hard. And she's being nice about it. That's what I aspired to be able to elicit strong views and strong opinions from people who realize that's not the only game in town. And your opinions get better and better the more you're able to listen to other people. Boy, did I stray in giving you that answer. I don't even remember what the question was.
But that is such a thing that I always tell people too. Like, the ability to listen, I think, is so important. And it's something that I think I actually learned after Penn. You know, I worked all these jobs and stuff like that. And I would interact with coworkers, I would interact with people, and I'm like, okay, what defines the people that, let's say, I get along with, or I feel a respect for, or I feel like they respect me? It really is, at the end of the day, like, that ability to listen, man. That's something so important that I want to highlight. Like, that's such
I think this gets us to an even bigger topic than the ones we've been on. Big. Education, in particular higher education, is built around the assumption that if I'm a teacher and you're a student, I know, you don't. I speak, you hear me speak. I give, you take. I am, you aren't. Yet I deliver, you receive. And that is so fallacious, even though it sort of respects older people who've acquired a lot of education and have advanced degrees. There's nothing wrong with that respect. But it's boring to me to think that my students are there to receive what I have to give. Why do that? It doesn't make any sense. Because it turns out, particularly at a really good school like Penn, but not only, it turns out that everyone has something to give. And I'm not just being woo-woo progressive, liberal. Everybody has something to give. I have taught the most difficult poems to grade school kids. I have taught the most difficult poems to non-English speakers, and we're doing it in English. I have taught poems to people with various disabilities, including people with non-speaking autism. The only reason that works is that all I want to do is say, everybody's got something to say. Take your time. And I am much better as a human being. I'm a better citizen. I'm a better parent. I'm a better grandparent. I'm a better person for being better at listening. Because if you listen to yourself, it gets boring after a while.
Yeah.
You ever notice there's a difference between politicians who are actually pretty good at listening and politicians who give the same speech everywhere they go. The latter group probably hate themselves. Oh no, not another stump speech. The former group can swerve when presented with an audience that has a particular need, political audience, let's say. A good listener who's doing a stump speech can swerve and adjust to the people they're talking to. And actually, we've seen this occasionally. Even big-time politicians can stop and want to know what people are saying. Talk. Or to switch the venue just a little bit. Well, actually, switch the venue a lot. I remember Elie Wiesel, the survivor of Auschwitz, when he was much older. He got a little tired of the speeches everybody wanted him to give. These were good speeches. And he was saying things that were really important. From podiums, sitting around a circle at schools, in his own classes I guess he taught at BU. Mm-hmm. But I remember one time he was at a school, high school, I think, and the high school kids and their parents were there. Everybody was eager to see the great Elie Wiesel. And Wiesel was about to stand behind the podium and give another talk on the same subject. Compelling, important subject. But still, I think you could tell, like the politician who'd given too many stump speeches, he was bored by his own speech. The man who had introduced him was a schlubby, regular old guide teacher. Someone who knew the subject matter and whose parents had been through the Holocaust, but still just a guy, not your main headliner. And Wiesel got up to the podium and he began speaking, and then he turned to the guy and he said, you know, I'd so much rather hear from you than hear myself talk. And there was a moment in the audience where, oh no, we wanted Elie Wiesel to speak. We don't want this guy to speak. This teacher, we know him. He's not the main guy. And the guy tentatively went up to the podium and he began to talk from the heart, unrehearsed. And Wiesel stood next to him. We need more of that. That guy had plenty to say. And it was good. And I actually think, would I be talking to you all these years later about Elie Wiesel's speech if it hadn't been for that loop that he threw us? So I really think that everybody of goodwill has something to say. We just need to wait for them to put it together and tell us.
Yeah. And I'll add to what Al just...
Jerry, I'm sorry to interrupt. I began this part of our conversation by saying that the structures of higher education have made this worse, the situation worse, by assuming that the most important thing was that we give the people who have the PhDs the podium and the license just to talk on and on and on and on. And we really need to change that formula.
My first full-time job after Penn, I worked at Fox 29 in Philly. So I sometimes would come back on campus, if you remember. But one of the things I learned very quickly being a journalist was you can interview people like people think, oh, I have my questions prepared. Or you can just talk to them, have a conversation. And since that first job, that's always how I've talked to people, how I've conducted interviews. It's like, let's have a conversation. I'm here to listen. I don't have an agenda. I don't have anything. Let me just listen to you. And I just want to learn, right? That's how I've been. And I think it's worked very well for me. Whenever I interview people, they're like, Jerry, it's very interesting. It's really cool talking to you. I'm like, yeah, because I'm trying to listen. That's all I'm here to do. So I second and third and fourth and like so support what Al is saying about all this.
I like your style, and I totally agree that that's the best way to go. And, you know, it may be that I've been at this so long that I can pull this off, but I think anybody can pull it off. The best way to enter into a conversation, even if it's a formal occasion, is to do it without notes.
Yeah.
Do it without notes.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And the best thing you can do, especially if you're in a group, small group, big group, is to ask to begin, as long as there's enough time for it, to begin the conversation by asking everyone to say something. You can do it simply as so-called introductions, icebreaker. The way I run my classes these days, I gamify everything. Everything is a game. And so I have a mug, and in the mug are strips of paper with the names of the students. So somebody in the class pulls a name out of the mug, and that person speaks. So they've been randomly chosen. So it's like not quite democracy, because in democracy, you get to raise your hand and it's your turn to speak. Not quite, but that's not the rigid definition of democracy. But when people are free to speak and they talk when they're ready to talk, people call it democratic. But the true democratic teaching is the one where you have no idea who is going to be the one to speak. It's random. Has anybody and everybody, and you can pass. If you, in my classes, this is Jerry, you come to visit. Where are you? Are you in Philly?
I'm in the DC area now, so I can come visit.
You have to come visit. Come sit in class, and you'll see. This is not the only gamification involved. Every aspect of my classes are gamified at this point, but this is a main one. And so you'll come into class, and if you're a visitor, your name goes into the mug. And people who I didn't prepare, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say, I'm not articulate, I'm not expert in this material. You give them a chance to pass, and you pick their name out of a mug. Guess what? Nobody's ever passed. No one has ever passed. Why is that?
Are you asking that rhetorically, or you want an answer from me?
Why I'm asking you a real question.
Okay.
Why do you think it is that no one ever wants to pass once their name is pulled out of the mug?
I think when you can get out of your head and just speak genuinely, it's something very refreshing that isn't allowed as much in modern society. So like, even though they're nervous, but once they're able to just be in the moment, it actually is something really powerful for them.
So, okay, you partly answered my question, which is to imagine that people can get over their nervousness. But why? What motivates people to speak when they're not prepared, when they're surprised at the offer to speak?
The other thing I can think of is potentially feedback. They get better feedback that way.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, but I also think there's something else going on. It's a very rare thing.
Oh, yes.
To walk into a space, it doesn't happen. To walk into a space and suddenly be asked to say anything about anything. I mean, people are attracted to that kind of freedom. I think all human beings are interested in that. Is it being taken seriously? No, because you were randomly chosen from a mug. It's not being taken seriously. It's being given the opportunity. Not because, Jerry, it looks like because you've carried all the books in, and I can tell from your book it's marked up, and there's a lot of yellow highlighting there, and you clearly have a bunch of notes, and you are clearly ready to talk. So, Jerry, what do you think about what we read for this class? That's not what I'm talking about. Although there's nothing wrong with that. But there are always 3 Jerrys in a class of 25. And they get to do it all because they're well prepared. But what if we extended the democracy of discussion, of conversation, to those who are not so-called well prepared? if you're in a family of 7 siblings, I'm not, but you can imagine how boisterous the dinner table is, right? What if the youngest had an absolutely mathematically equal chance to be called on to say whatever it is that they want to say at the dinner table? The little 3-year-old punk gets to say whatever. That is the way to live, I think. Why doesn't that inform the important conversations that we have either in school or out of school, in civil society, in neighborhoods? Why? I don't know why. Why not? People are afraid of ceding power to others. They're afraid of people saying things that are going to be unpopular. I don't.
Yeah, it might also go back to that thing that we were taught since probably middle school. Oh, but what if I ask a stupid question, right? And then we always counter that by saying, well, the only stupid question is the one that you didn't ask, right? It's kind of like that.
Isn't that exactly it?
Yeah.
Or, there are no stupid questions, because questions are by definition admissions that you don't know anything. I mean, there are people who ask questions who know the answer and are just being assholes, but that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're assuming goodwill.
Yeah. Assuming goodwill.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a little bit about Pennsound too, because that was there when I was there, and I checked the website and it's still going on. So tell me about Pennsound. How's that going?
Pennsound is the world's largest archive of recordings of poets reading their own poetry. It's huge. Probably about 85,000 individual sound files.
Wow.
They're all MP3. A few others are WAV files, but mostly MP3, a few videos. MP3 downloadable by definition. When we created Pennsound, by the way, in between 2003 and 2005, we put the archive together, and I believe in January 2005 we launched it. So it's more than 20 years old. Our counterintuitive idea, our radical idea, was to make the MP3 files link on a Web 1.0 page. It's still web. It's a 1.0 site. We add to it using HTML. There's nothing automated about Pennsound. Is that weird?
Wow.
Nothing automated at all. Anyway, we wanted a site where you could right-click and download to your iPod at that point, or to whatever your player was. These days, it's very easy to take a URL of a sound file and get it on your smartphone and listen, or you can click on it and listen without downloading it. You can stream it. But we felt it was important to make the downloads, to make the MP3s nomadic. And the only way we can preserve the information, archivists hate this. They hate this. Archivists get very upset, because if we took this conversation and converted it to audio only MP3 and posted it so it could be downloaded, the archivist is worried that the metadata that in the file name, for instance, or in whatever you can put metadata into an MP3, as long as you understand how to do that, that metadata could be erased by people who you could just download it to your desktop, click rename the file. You can claim you wrote the poem. You can claim that instead of being done in 1978, it was done in 2025. We don't care, because most people aren't going to change the name, and it doesn't matter. We would much rather achieve distribution than archival repository quality. It's controversial at the time, very controversial, because most sites did what? They were paywalled, or they wouldn't let you download. You had to stream. At the same time, iPods would not stream. You had to have the file in. You remember how complicated it was to get?
Yes, I remember.
So Pennsound is revolutionary in that it insists it is both progressive and space age, but it is also incredibly old-fashioned. It takes the verities and the beauty of 1990s, early 2000s internet modes, takes the best qualities of them, and maintains that they're still the best. So anyway, Pennsound is, you can hear, I don't know how many, a couple of hundred, 300, 400 poets. And we keep acquiring more recordings. Some are very rare. T.S. Eliot, Wallace Stevens, William Carlos Williams, Marianne Moore. And some are not rare. They're new, readings, poetry readings that are happening this year. And we keep adding. It's a curated site. And you just have to type Pennsound into your search box and you'll find us.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's one of those projects that I was aware of, but I had to kind of bring it to more people because I knew it was doing something. And now we finally got to kind of talk about it, finally, after all these years.
Yeah, Pennsound.
How has the student body changed since I graduated in the 2010s to now? Is there a change in people's focus? Do people appreciate humanities more? Do people not appreciate humanities more?
I'll give you the short answer and then a slightly longer answer. Short answer is no, they're the same. They're great. Students are great. I'm reflecting a lot on 40 years of students because this is my 40th year teaching. And in fact, I'm engaged in writing a book. I told you that one of my courses is a course on representations of the Holocaust. It's really a course about pain and testimony, survivors. But anyway, taught it for 40 years. And I'm writing a book, co-authoring a book with my friend Sophia DeRose. That is a book about those students, 40 years of students taking that same class. Yeah. And it's about a movie we watch and have watched since 1985, 40 years ago, by Claude Lanzmann, a Frenchman, called Shoah. It's 9.5 hours long, and every student who's ever taken that course has to watch 9.5 hours of this movie in French. So the book is about that. And so I've been thinking a lot, Jerry, about my students over 40 years. We've been interviewing people going way back. And a lot of people come with people from the early years come with the assumption, students don't read, they don't pay attention, they're not as bright. Well, I don't think they say that, and it's not true. It's not true. Students have somewhat different modes, has to do with the technologies, that are available to them. But so the short answer is they are the same. They're great. Maybe at a place like Penn, with all due respect to you, I think it's harder to get into Penn, and they're probably, more adept academically. Doesn't mean them better students. It just means that they're like on their game academically. Slightly longer version of that question. I think it's really important for us not to make generalizations about generations. And the implication of people, and people ask that question all the time when they find out I'm of a certain age and I've taught a long time. And they usually have an opinion, usually a negative opinion about the current students. And I think we should have a conversation, not you and I right now, we don't have the time, but we as a society should have a conversation about why we make those assumptions about younger people. And it only generates animosity toward the older people. Because let's face it, if you're Generation Z, or even if you're a millennial, which you are, I guess, you are right to resent the boomers who started investing in the market so early that you can't help but be well off if you invested, if you had the luck of having a job where your employer invested in your retirement savings. But that doesn't cover everybody, obviously. But the stereotype of the boomer is that they're all set and that they're able to retire and that they could afford the houses when they bought their houses. And now young people can't. You can't afford a house in New York City or San Francisco or Oakland even, or whatever.
Or even in Montana sometimes.
Yeah, right, exactly. So that resentment then feeds resentment going back the other way. Oh, you guys, you everything's been given to you. Stop complaining about housing prices or whatever. And it just creates a kind of generational animosity that is not necessary and is counterproductive. I mean, the fact is that boomers are getting out of the workforce, living high on the hog, generally speaking, doing well, generally speaking, not entirely, but generally speaking. And whether we like it or not, the 2030s is going to be all about the younger people running the thing. So we really better be nice to them. we really should stop making judgments about them. I'll end with this one thing. In the summer, I volunteer at a summer camp with children. And they enter the space. It's a rural area. It's in the mountains. They enter the space and their phones don't work because there's no cell service. And the Wi-Fi is not available to them. So they just leave their phones. We're talking not just 8 and 9-year-olds, but 14, 15, 16-year-olds. So they make a choice. I'm going for 2 weeks without any phone, any communication. Now, the general assumption is they're going to freak out. There's going to be withdrawal. They're going to be mad. They're going to be depressed. They're going to be suicidal. With all due respect to the reality of social media addictions, which are real, the fact is that if you go cold turkey like that, rather than being resentful of the people who organized such a place where there's no cell service, you actually realize that the people you want to talk to are right in front of you and you can talk with them. And that, frankly, it's qualitatively not that different from the talking, the chatting that you do when you have your phones. It's just that you don't have any option of dealing with the people who are not here. You can only deal with the people who are here. So I tell stories around campfires almost every night in the summer to these kids who've been without phones for days or weeks. And my stories are no less than 45 minutes in length. I tell 45-minute, incredibly complicated narratives. They're often ghost stories, or not ghosts, but scary, whatever. Things happen. And they have no choice. They're sitting around a fire, and they're like 100 yards from their beds, and they're not allowed to get up and go to their beds because we're together. And there's a fire, and there's an old man with a voice and a fire, and they listen for 45 minutes. And a few weeks later, if I happen to come upon them and I ask them, how'd you like the story? And they can repeat the story back to me. And then they tell their parents the story when the parents come to pick them up from camp. And then 3 years pass, and 5 years pass, and 10 years pass. And they see me and they can tell me that story. Wow. It is a lie that these kids can't pay attention. It is a pernicious lie. Whose fault is it that they can't pay attention? It's not theirs. We'll end there.
Wow. The power of storytelling. Like, by telling a story like that, it's worth 1 million data points. It's worth 1 million studies with numbers. See, that's going back to the humanities, the STEM thing. This is the power of stories, the power of anecdotes.
Sure.
Wow. Guys, Al, Filreis, and I would love to have you back in the future. I would love to have more conversations with you. And I'm definitely going to come visit a class of yours sometime. So this is great, man. Thank you again. And do you want me to link anything specific in the description when I get this out?
Link to modpo.org
and
link to Pennsound and the writers.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. So everyone, thank you so much for watching, and leave your comments, people. Leave your comments. It's an open forum. So leave your comments. If you have questions for Al, questions for anyone else at the Kelly Writers House, just feel free to leave it in the comments. So everyone watching, this was Al, and thank you so much. He'll be back.